Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 21st, 2023. The D.C. Magicians. An April 14th, 2023 article in the Wall Street Journal by Laura Sanders demonstrates how effective the D.C. magicians have been in disguising the amount of income payroll taxes Americans pay. In the article, she makes the following points. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, the sources of federal revenue are as follows. 54.2% of federal revenue comes from the individual income tax. 30.3% from social insurance taxes, now that's the Social Security and Medicare payroll taxes, 1.8% excise taxes, 8.2% corporate income taxes, 0.6% estate and gift taxes, and 4.9% from other revenue. The article goes on to analyze how the tax burden falls across different groups of taxpayers. 43% of taxpayers earn $50,000 or less in income. This group will earn about 10% of the total income and pay 3.5% of the total taxes. Nearly 80% of projected income taxes for 2022 will be paid by about 10% of filers earning $200,000 or more, and those earning $1 million or more will pay half of that. Over 70% of long-term gains are expected to be reported by people earning $1 million or more, and the number of filers with $1 million or more of income is expected to be 917,000 for 2022. That compares to 597,000 in 2018. That's a 54% increase. Now here's the problem. For decades, the D.C. magicians have been making the following incorrect assertions about the income payroll tax system. That corporate income taxes have no impact on individual taxpayers. That higher corporate taxes do not result in higher prices for goods and services, and that making sure that higher earners pay a much higher percentage of the total tax burden is more important than the amount of spendable income that Americans are left with after taxes. Now here's the truth. Corporations are owned by shareholders. Any taxes paid by corporations reduces the amount of money the corporation has to distribute to its shareholders. Now, income payroll taxes are costs of doing business, just like labor, rent, utilities, materials, and assorted other things. Now, every business must generate enough income to cover all of its costs and make a sufficient profit in order to stay in business. Now, while it's impossible to calculate exact amounts, most economists agree that the costs imposed on businesses by the income payroll tax system increase retail prices by at least 10%. Lower earners spend almost all of their income on retail goods and services. Consequently, the income payroll tax reduces the spendable income of lower earners by at least 10%. The actual taxes paid by people making $50,000 or less is not 3.5%, but actually 13.5%. In conclusion, the people in D.C. have demonstrated that the big lie, now that's the title given to the reporting of Hitler's propagandist Joseph Goebbels, that works even in our time. Now, D.C. is like the magician that distracts our attention with a flourish while he puts the rabbit into the hat that he will later pull out to our astonishment. We're all told that the only income payroll tax we pay is what we see on our W-2, and we're constantly told that the wealthy don't pay their fair share. Well, people point out that D.C. wants to keep the income payroll tax system because they use it to extort money from special interests by threatening to change the tax laws. Now, while that's true, there'll still be plenty of other ways to get money from special interests when the income tax is replaced by the FAIRtax. Others point out that D.C. wants to keep the income payroll tax system because of the control it gives them over people's lives. They can influence our decisions by offering tax breaks for desired behavior, like buying an electric car, and they can also punish the people who disagree with them with big tax penalties. Now, one of the big reasons that the D.C. elite fear the FAIRtax is that the FAIRtax would show everyone the true cost of government. With the cost of the income payroll tax system embedded in the prices of everything we buy, a significant portion of our total tax burden is hidden from us. With the FAIRtax, everyone will see the full cost of government on every retail receipt. Now, the DC elites fear that when Americans clearly see how much their government is costing them, they will rise up in outrage. If the family making $50,000 a year realizes that the income payroll tax system is really taking an additional $400 a month out of their budget, they will soon realize that they've been conned and will take their vengeance out on DC in the next election. The elites know that if the American people ever saw the full cost of government, they would demand massive changes in the DC establishment and enforce those demands at the polls. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? When the fair tax is enacted, there will be no need to fear being audited by the IRS because there will be no more IRS. Under the fair tax, there will be no more tax returns. We'll pay our taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. Now, there's going to be a vote on the fair tax in the House of Representatives. Speaker McCarthy and other elites didn't want it, but it was forced on them. So we now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They can vote for the present income payroll tax system, or they can vote for the fair tax. They can support the corrupt income tax in the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate it. It can't be any simpler than that. They can hide the true cost of government, or they can pass the fair tax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. Finally, they can support the largest transfer of power from the government to the people, the fair tax, or they can vote against it. Now, if members think the fair tax needs to be changed, they can propose the change. Don't let them reject the entire bill because it has a flaw that can be easily addressed. So please stand with us and demand that your representatives support a much fairer, much simpler, and much more efficient way to fund the government, the fair tax. The fair tax doesn't pick winners and losers. Because it taxes spending, not earnings, the fair tax lets everyone save for their retirement tax-free. The fair tax collects the revenue the federal government needs to operate, but does it in a way that has the least adverse impact on our individual freedom and the least impact on our economic prosperity. With a fair tax, there are no tax returns to file, no records to keep. We pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. And with a fair tax, there is no need for the IRS. If you sell a used couch or a used jet ski online, there is no fair tax due on that transaction. The fair tax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the fair tax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives. Not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should all remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the fair tax. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. Help bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing, or we'll actually call this investing, $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, because we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. So please go to FAIRtax.org and invest in AFFT. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.